Welcome. In this video, I'll be talking about yet another tool for Amazon Web Services. And in this video, we will specifically be talking about the AWS command line tool, also known as the AWS CLI tool. Now, if you go into the documentation, you should be able to get all the information about the AWS CLI tool. The AWS CLI tool allows you to access multiple AWS services using a single command line tool. Now, for folks who may have some experience with AWS prior to this course, this tool is now the replacement for all other previous command line tools. So there used to be CLI tools separately for each AWS service. So there used to be an EC2 tool, there used to be an EMR tool, and then there used to be the famous S3 CMD tool to control S3, but now all of them have been replaced by this single unified tool known as the AWS CLI tool. In order to install the AWS CLI tool, you just need to go into, so this is an instance that I have running. Now the command for invoking AWS CLI is AWS, and most current versions of Ubuntu should tell you what the command is if you don't have that program already installed. So this is a fresh instance, it should not have that installed already. So I'm just going to say sudo apt-get install AWS CLI. And of course this command is sudo yum install AWS CLI if you're using Amazon Linux or any version of Fedora or Red Hat. So it's going to go and pick up all of the required packages to install this. Should take a few minutes. And that's done. So now that you have AWS ready, if you just type in the AWS command, it should give you the options for the AWS command. So like the other SDKs involved with AWS, you have to find some way in which you can convey your account access credentials to the tool so that it can actually talk to AWS and make those service calls on your behalf. For AWS CLI, the command is AWS configure, and that's going to ask you for your access key ID as well as your secret key. And you can also give in the default region name and sort of the output format that you would prefer for the AWS calls. So in here, if you just provide your access key ID and secret access key, then AWS will have all of the tools that it needs to access your account. It would have your credentials and it would be able to issue the service calls on your behalf. All right, now once you've configured AWS with your access key ID and secret access key, let's look at a simple command that you can use with EC2 and AWS CLI. So here I have already prepared a simple command that will actually run an instance for you. So the command is basically AWS followed by EC2, and the actual command is run instances. And then as parameters, you want to provide the parameters required to run this, to actually create this AWS instance for you. So you want to provide the image ID, the AMI ID, the count or number of instances that you're launching. So in this case, it's 1, the instance type, which is T1 micro, the name of the key pair that you're using, which I've given, as well as the security groups that you are going to use for this launch command. Do remember that AWS also gives you the option of other commands that allows you to create a key pair and a security group. So, but I'm just using that ones that are already existing in the account. And if you press enter, it should give you back the actual instance ID that was now launched. So if I just refresh, and there's an instance that's now pending, which is the new instance that I just asked with the same instance ID that was returned back to me from the CLI. Now I have the next command prepared, which is AWS EC2 describe instances. Describe instances allows you to just query AWS EC2 to find out any properties of any particular instance. And if you simply provide AWS EC2 describe instances without any other parameters, it is going to just spit out in your format, either JSON or XML, the properties of all available instances in your EC2 AWS account. So if you provide a specific instance ID, it's going to give you the information only about that instance ID. And in this case, this is the instance that we just launched. And you can also provide an optional query parameter which says, okay, just give me the public IP address of this instance. Executing that command, it was successful, and it just returned back the public IP address of that instance. Now, if you want to actually kill the instance, the command's quite simple. Since we already verified that the instance is available and running, if you just simply give the command terminate instances and then provide the instance IDs, in this case we just have a single instance, that's I37C57AE4. Issuing this command now to AWS CLI will actually give back the command response from AWS, which is, okay, this particular instance ID was previously running but now is going down into the shutdown state. An important sort of tip that I can give you at this stage is many of these commands will accept a dry run parameter, which will simply issue the command to AWS but also instruct AWS not to execute it. So it's a good way to check the syntax of your command without having AWS actually do anything about that command. So it'll return back, okay, this command's accepted, but since you set the dry run flag, I did not actually go and do the operation that you asked me to do. So that's a very useful parameter to add to pretty much any AWS. Now the AWS CLI command can also be used to manage other services apart from EC2, and most notably it can be used to manage S3 buckets as well as objects inside buckets. So this is now basically the replacement for the S3 CMD. So if you just type in AWS S3, you should be able to access the other subcommands inside S3. So I'm going to show you a few examples. For the first command that we'll talk about in AWS S3 is MB, which is also make bucket. And I'll just say video demo 619, for example. So the bucket name needs to be unique, globally unique, in fact. So, and that was successful. So now if you want, you can list sort of what is available in a bucket. It should be empty right now. So we got an empty listing back. Let's create a quick file, abcd, for example, and then put that into test.txt. Now you can basically use the cp command to upload or download or even move or copy files between different buckets. So in this particular example, I'm just going to copy the test.txt file from the local machine to the bucket named video demo 619. And if we repeat the ls command, it should tell us that yes, there is a file called test.txt. So let me remove the local version of that same file, and let's download the file back from S3. So again, you just simply use the cp command in AWS S3. So it's AWS S3 cp followed by the source file location. So we're going to say 15 video demo 619 /test.txt, and then the destination, which is right here. And it actually downloaded that file. Now the versatility of that command is, like I said, it can also be used to copy a particular file or object from between buckets, between S3 buckets. So it's just a single command for all of that. All right, let's say that we want to sort of delete that particular file that we just uploaded to S3, right? So the command for there is AWS S3 rm, which is remove. And if you just say video demo 619 /test.txt, and it should delete that file for you. And finally, the the last command that I'll cover for AWS S3 is RB, which is remove bucket. So we can remove the bucket that we just created. Now this command will only work, AWS S3 RB followed by the name of the bucket will only work if you have that bucket completely emptied already. So if you've removed all of the files, then this command will work. If you already have files in a bucket and you just simply want to delete the bucket but don't want to bother deleting all of the individual files inside the bucket, then you can just give a force parameter to this command, which will actually delete all the individual files inside the bucket before deleting the bucket for you. Anyway, so we just issued the remove bucket command, and that's just removed that S3 bucket from our account. So that was a quick rundown of the AWS CLI command. And for those of you who want to simply write bash scripts for some of your projects or some of the work that you're doing on AWS, then AWS CLI is basically the best command you can use for controlling virtually everything on your AWS account.